Hey there, and welcome to another episode of the Supermarketers Podcast. I'm your host, Gen Furukawa, and today we have CEO and founder of LetterDrop, Parthi Loganathan. Parthi, thanks so much for joining today.
For having me, and great job saying my name.
Oh, I appreciate it. Thank you. I also endure the same pain of many mispronunciations. So just to start, I came across you when we were actually I was in the same space when you were at LetterDrop with SEO content, and it seems you've gone through several different pivots as the market's changed, as AI has evolved. If you could just give me a brief overview of your background, where you came from, and then what LetterDrop is right now.
Yeah, absolutely. So I run a spicy back startup called LetterDrop. Previously, I was a product manager at Google. I was on the search team as well as what is currently called Google Workspaces, previously G Suite, building out some of their like chat experiences to compete with Slack. And started LetterDrop really to help companies figure out SEO, especially B2B businesses. And we were doing great. We worked with awesome logos like Ramp, for example. But I think sometime around 2024, we started seeing changes in market dynamics, just like less pull and demand for that. And this was around the time when ChatGPT was starting to hit its stride. ChatGPT was launched, I want to say like end of 2022. And so it was like a full year of adoption. More people were starting to increasingly use ChatGPT to search for information. And since then, we've had AEO and all this stuff blow up. But in 2024, I realized something needed to change. And instead of switching gears and like trying something completely new, we stuck with the buyers that we currently had and we just shifted the product that we were kind of selling them. And we got really into signals and figuring out how to do outbound. We were quite good at outbound ourselves. Our BDR, we just have a one-person BDR team, and we're booking north of 7 meetings per week through calls and LinkedIn and great targeting and great campaigns. And so LetterDrop has since evolved into a platform that really helps companies with intelligence, identifying buyers who are in market, evaluating solutions, maybe talking to your competitors, and then helping you actually run the account intelligence on that and figuring out who to reach out to from which sender and when.
You have a quote. I think I saw that when everybody's super, no one is super, right? The Incredibles, and that's kind of AI at this moment, right? When everybody has these powers, when you can do more, 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 then all of a sudden the market is influx with volume, spam, slop. Your approach is very different, and it seems like you are living that with just having one BDR booking 7 meetings per month. Can you walk me
Yeah.
through yeah, your approach there, where it's not a volume based, but it's a social signal that actually drives the impact? And I would totally agree from my own experience where the signal counts. But how can somebody kind of understand that and implement that themselves?
I think a lot of businesses need to actually look inwards. To your point, everybody has access to the same tools, right? So at this point, everybody has certain types of signals like website visitors, G2 reviews, people like talking about certain things online. And so the first thing I recommend businesses do is actually look inwards and understand what is unique about your buyers? What is unique about the way in which you solve their top problem? And how can you design campaigns that are value additive? And how can you identify signals that uniquely point to them being in market? And so I think that's really the crux of outbound is really getting very narrow in terms of who you reach out to and when and why. I think a lot of companies just want to spam their entire TAM with the exact same messaging and they just kind of keep sort of recycling and going through the same lists. And maybe that works. And if you scale it enough, like you can kind of get by, but it's a very expensive way to do it. And see the vast majority of companies just churning through their BDRs, doing layoffs, not getting the CAC that they need when they try to approach it that way. And so you can use these tools, and tools like us also provide a lot of valuable first party and third party signals and intelligence. But I think companies really need to think about like why people buy from them and what needs to be true of a business in order to buy from them.
Yeah. Uh, One of those things, like in terms of the signal that's interesting is like the competitive intelligence, right? So if you have like of the whole TAM, maybe 5% is in market at any given time, and they are shopping around looking at different vendors to identify what might be the best. Let's assume that maybe you do know why people would buy. How can you identify who of that 5% of the TAM is actually active? Can you elaborate on that competitive intelligence element?
Yeah, so in an ideal world, especially when you win competitive deals at a pretty high clip, what you would want to do is you would want access to your competitor's CRM, right? So every time a new deal opens in your competitor's CRM, you'd be wanting to also go after the same company. Unfortunately, you obviously can't see your competitor's CRM, but there's enough data out there publicly online where if you look carefully, you can kind of guess at those things. You can kind of guess who is talking to who at any point in time. And an example of that is if you were a company that sells in a fairly competitive space, say call recording software like Gong, you could try to figure out, hey, there's companies who are maybe checking out SalesLoft or Chorus, and they're actually talking to this person, Chris Anderson or Rachel Foster. So we can actually gather that kind of data by looking online and being very careful in terms of who is talking to who and layering on some like statistics and probability on top of that to understand if it's worth reaching out to them.
That talking would be like commenting on Chris Anderson's post or first degree connections on social, something like that.
Things like that definitely feed into the model for sure. So you can essentially look at relationships being formed online and guess as to who might be engaging with whom.
Got it. Okay, so that is a very compelling pitch. There was like 2.4 million in missed opportunity from Gong. That's what you're highlighting, and then that you're identifying that individual at the company, and so that's where you're saying this is instead of spraying to 500 at Gong, just identify that one person who is in market based on the social signal and competitive intelligence. Like,
Yeah, that's right. So most companies, what you're doing is you have your account list, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 accounts, and you're wasting your time going through them. You're going to maybe miss somebody who is in market because of timing when you know that if they're actively talking to one of your competitors, from their perspective, they want to evaluate multiple vendors so that they make the right choice. And so you're very, very likely to be able to book a meeting with them and get into the room if you talk to somebody who is actively talking to one of your competitors. And I think at most companies, they don't spend the time to kind of figure out, or they don't even know that you can do this. And so I think once you do realize you can do this and you have the right talk tracks, you can start getting into more competitive deals. And hopefully, if you have a great sales process and product, you can start winning more of them as well.
right, right. One thing I wanted to learn more about is how you're encapsulating this or systemizing this. So, in you have one SDR, so presumably that's like the best person and they're trained. But if you have like a team of 10, one of your value propositions is that you can clone your best SDR, identify what it is that makes them great, and then kind of like systemize and scale across your team. So things aren't necessarily lost in the DMs of that one SDR. How do you actually do that? Like, what does that process look like? How can you scale that and codify that for, whether it's LetterDrop or other tools? I'd love to know, like, because I think that's the critical part with AI is where you're taking all this unstructured data and saying, like, here's the exact system that you can replicate so that an AI could do it. It could be cloned, right?
Absolutely. So I think one of the issues with a lot of SDR teams is they don't necessarily have the data in terms of what is working today. They might have anecdotal data where they sit down with their team and they ask them, hey, like what messaging, what copy, what talk tracks booked you meetings? What types of ICP are you reaching out to? But truthfully, at most teams we talk to, this is very disorganized and they don't actually have this data all in their Salesforce or HubSpot the way you would expect them to. And so I think there are lots of solutions that have come on market which give you better visibility. Things like understanding what emails your reps are sending, understanding the transcripts of the calls they're having, or even understanding the DMs that they're sending to folks. And so one of the things we do at LetterDrop is we actually try to help you understand what is going on across all your reps and trying to help you form a more complete picture beyond what you might have via email. So we actually give you a better idea of like the number of people you're talking to, what you're sending, what their responses are like, etc., so that you can actually understand like how many meetings you're booking across your team and what conversations are being had. Once you actually understand the conversations that are being had, you can actually analyze these and understand what are the winning playbooks, signals, and messaging. So recently at LetterDrop, we just launched our MCP to work with Claude. And so we actually like help our customers understand what to do by taking this data and feeding it directly into your AI systems like Claude, so you can analyze them and actually get recommendations directly over here. Once you have recommendations from a system like this, what you can actually do is you can codify them in LetterDrop through workflows. So you can actually say, hey, I know this works. I want to repeat this over and over again. And so you can kind of build these systems that just feed your SDRs with the right messaging, with the right lead, with the right signal at the right time. So that's kind of how we're doing things in LetterDrop to kind of scale your best reps. And the next evolution that I think is going to be happening soon, and you're seeing a lot of companies already do that, is making this completely agentic so that instead of thinking about brittle workflows where it's, I got a signal, here's exactly what you do when you receive that signal, an agentic version of these tools looks more like I have this signal. Here's all the context on this account that we have so far, past conversations, everything in the CRM, other signals that we've received from them over the past 30, 60, 90 days. What is the next best action for us to take? Is the next best action for us to multi-thread? Do we get our BDR to email one of their end users or ICs to ask for intelligence? Do we wait for a response and then feed that back and then get one of our executives to reach out to one of their executives using that intelligence for a very tailored message that's not a pitch? Do we get our BDR to follow up afterwards with the actual pitch? So this is actually a sort of multi-step multi-turn process that is happening that's using intelligence across the account and across all of the people available at your company in order to reach out to that account. So it gets fairly complicated. And until now, you it's basically impossible to have done that through Zapier-like workflows. But with agents, the same systems that Claude Code uses to write code, you can actually employ those same systems to think about account intelligence and figure out like what is the next step and what should be done. And so that's what we're in the process of launching right now. We've started dog fooding this product ourselves internally within LetterDrop, and I'm very surprised by how we can think through things. We're just helping it think better and think more like us before we launch it broadly to the world.
Amazing. But in that, it's almost like the meta existential question, like what would the BDR be doing in that role, right? Like the BDR is, their role is to set up calls for the account executive, right? Or just you have 7 calls per week, hit that goal, that's their goal. Like they are managing knobs and dials, but after a while, right, the autonomous agent can do it itself. And ultimately, like, is that kind of like the next evolution after agentic flows is LetterDrop just basically sets up calls with your ICP.
I think LetterDrop is a piece in the system. I don't think it's the answer. I think you're going to still need BDRs. Here are two reasons why, or two things that the agentic systems are maybe not going to do for you. Number one, as long as you are selling to other people, which again is not going to be true for every business moving forward, I think truthfully, a percentage of the economy is going to have the agents purchasing things, right? But I think for like higher value purchases, you're going to still have people involved. And so as long as you're selling to people, people want to feel like they're talking to other intelligent people. And so the BDR's role is really to provide that intelligence, be personable, be able to handle objections, all that good stuff. And they're going to be focused on channels or methods where the person is first. So it's less going to be like email or text, and it's going to be more so things like phone calls, video DMs, voice notes, meeting in person. And so I think that's where the BDRs spend more of their time, anything which requires a face, putting a face to a name and building a relationship. Everything behind the curtains for the BDR, which are things like account intelligence, deciding who to reach out to, who to call today, who to send a video DM to today, what do I say to them, what do I know about them, all of that is going to be taken care of by agents. So I think that's where the BDR comes in. Number two, where I don't think the agents are going to be as helpful, is maybe partially helpful, but is really the creativity in terms of the campaigns and understanding your business. So you can all obviously brainstorm with Claude or ChatGPT or Gemini, but our best performing campaign today, by and large, is we just send people value. We give people value. So we will go find an in-market lead who is evaluating one of your competitors and solutions in your category, and we'll go send that to the VP of Sales, to the CMO, to the VP of Biz Dev at a company and say, hey, do you want a free lead? I think here's a person, there's a 30% chance that they are actively evaluating your category. If I were you, I would get your team to reach out to them. And that performs phenomenally well because we're essentially giving people free value. Think about it. You probably spend hundreds, if not thousands of dollars per qualified lead for like mid-market and enterprise type sales. And we're just giving that to you for free. So it obviously piques their curiosity enough for them to want to come and talk to us. And so those types of campaigns or those types of creative things, I don't know if you're going to be able to do those with agents. I think those are things that where you just really understand your business and you understand your buyer and you get creative about things you can do. They may not be scalable, but those are the most effective outbound campaigns by far.
Yeah, that is a great idea. I love that. And yeah, the value, the perceived value to that CMO or VP of sales is huge. And you're just setting them up for success. So you did touch on Claude Code and then how people can just in general do so much more, maybe with less, which makes the barrier or the objections harder for the person selling, but also just like an interesting thought because we're in this world of software and also we're like right in the midst, I think probably the beginning of where Claude Code is so powerful and also easy to kind of build something and vibe code something. Can you give me your thoughts on where you're seeing this in terms of SaaS tools? Is this a compression of the market, tech stack, and where software even stands in this when people can build their own softwares personalized to their needs?
I I think it's definitely the depth of a lot of SaaS for sure. There's no way around that. Like I build a lot of our own internal tools. Heck, the sort of competitor dummy data I showed you earlier during our interview was actually something we just built with Lovable, right? Which our marketer put together. And so I think there's going to be more internal tooling for sure that people build bespoke for themselves. And you don't even have to be an engineer to build this kind of stuff. I know lots of people who are non-technical who are able to actually build fairly interesting things all by themselves. And so there are a couple of things that change now. One is there's this build versus buy decision that every buyer is thinking about themselves. And then the second thing is you also have competitive pressure. If it's easy to build, there are more people who maybe previously would not have built something who do it now, and so you're going to have more competitors. And so all of this is going to be a compression in terms of pricing power for SaaS. I also don't think that people are going to be using a lot of SaaS moving forward. I think agents will be using your software for you. And so I think the world is moving towards a system where there's more agents using software. The software that is valuable is software that's going to be able to provide something that's very hard to vibe code or build yourself, requires a lot of thought, a lot of edge cases, requires proprietary data, requires expertise. And then your software essentially opens up APIs or an MCP and feeds into the broader system that your clients are going to use, their own Claude code or what have you. And that's what we're building LetterDrop for, actually. Like in the past 2 weeks, we essentially exposed probably 70% of LetterDrop as MCPs. All our customers who are using Claude Code, I encourage them to just like talk to Claude Code and get it to use LetterDrop because it's way easier. And then we do what we're good at, and we don't do things that we're not specialized at. And so if you want to build like a billion dashboards and create things for your CEO to look at, we just provide raw data into MCP, like I showed you earlier, and then you build the dashboards yourself. So our SaaS's value in terms of reporting has been diminished, but our value is really being an API provider of unique data that's very hard for you to get today, which is what are my reps doing outside of email and calling and their other channels for outreach. So that's how I kind of think about it. I think SaaS is going to be less lucrative of a business because of competition and more build versus buy. I think the software that survives is going to really plug into existing systems that customers have, and it's going to probably be a lot more affordable and cheaper. I think what this means from like a business perspective is we're going to see fewer massive venture-backed companies, and I think we're going to see like a proliferation of smaller SaaS companies. And then venture is going to go back to what it used to be used for, which was like deep tech, hard tech, things which are actually very capital intensive and not just like the 30th payroll provider that somebody wants to build in 2026.
Yeah, I'm starting to see that myself, like this, because I've heard about, oh, everything's just going to interface with an API or MCP. And like Hrefs, for example, like keyword research, data for SEO, those things, you don't need to go to the UI, just work in the Cloud Code terminal or IDE, and you can get all the data and information, and then it's already in the context of your Cloud Code instance. So I'm starting to understand the vision that you laid out. Parthi, thanks so much for sharing your time and expertise. To learn more about LetterDrop, it's letterdrop.com. And then what platform are you most active on and easiest to access you?
Yeah, I post a bunch on LinkedIn. You can find me by searching for Parthi Letter Drop over there. My email is parthi@letterdrop.com if you have any questions or want to reach out.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Parthi.
Thanks for having me.
Of course.